D-Day, that's when we liberate France. That's when the war starts turning. Appeasement is what happened to Hitler. We gave him everything he wanted. That's why he started the war. That's why he continued the war. And then in America, we're arresting Japanese because they attacked us in Pearl Harbor. So that's Executive Order 9066. So we're interning the Japanese. And the only thing that ends the war finally in Japan is the atomic bombs. So Hiroshima. Nagasaki. Then we made the bombs with the Manhattan Project. So the Manhattan Project is how the bombs got made. And then inside the war, you had people like the Navajo Code Talkers, the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, and then you also had women that were involved in the war. So everybody had a job.
Thank you. Gracias.
The Indians, so they had like a special code that the Japanese could not break because nobody else speaks Navajo except the Navajo. Yes, kind of, yeah. Okay, and then right after World War II, you have the Cold War. So we go into it, and it's a war between the superpowers, the United States and the USSR, so between communism and democracy. In the Cold War, you have things like the Truman Doctrine, where we say that we're going to fight communism wherever it starts. But because of communism, you have things like the Red Scare and McCarthyism, where we're scared of communists. So we go after them. We jail them. We put them in jail with no evidence. It also starts the arms race, the space race. So you have Sputnik, the thing that the Russians send out there. So technology starts getting better. Under JFK, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, where it was almost World War III, the end, because both countries were about to blow each other up. And then the Marshall Plan was in order to help countries not become communist. Within communism, though, you had two wars. So you had the Korean War with the DMZ and Song Yeon-il, and where we're still against North Korea. And then you also have the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War was the domino theory effect. So if we let Vietnam fall to communism, then all these other countries are going to fall into communism. And this is where people start protesting the war. And this is where people start not trusting their government because the government lies about the Gulf of Tonkin. And then they're saying we're winning the war, but we're not really winning the war. And then at the same time that this is happening, because remember, sometimes history overlaps, you have the civil rights movement. So it started with a little girl, Linda Brown, and then desegregation of schools. So 1954, you have Martin Luther King, who's like a big protester. He promotes peace. Because of all these things, you get the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 65, and they help things better for African Americans. And it all goes back to Plessy versus Ferguson. So 1896, he made things separate but equal, which was a bad thing because just because you're separate doesn't mean you're equal. And this is what tries to get rid of it all. You had Little Rock 9, the 9 kids that couldn't go into the high school. And then during the 1960s, people are still protesting. They're still trying to make things better. It's totally your turn. So you had the feminist movement where women are trying to get more rights. So you had Betty Friedan, and she was trying to make things equal for women. You had the Chicano movement with Cesar Chavez, and then you had Lyndon B. Johnson, Great Society. So he's pouring in money into things like Head Start and Medicare and all these programs to help the people out.
Okay, 1970s to 1989, you still have the modern presidents. You have OPEC. OPEC is an organization of petroleum exporting countries. They're going to place an embargo on the United States because there's a war between the Arabs and the Palestinians, and Israel. And so we support Israel, so they're going to place an embargo on us. So the oil consumption in the United States is going to be very, very limited. The Iran-Contra affair has to do with Reagan.
No, Carter. Jimmy Carter and then Reagan, yeah.
The Iran-Contra affair.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think it should go like this, sorry. The Iran hostage crisis under Jimmy Carter, Americans are taken hostage in Iran. They're being kept there hostages for 444 days. The Americans cannot go in there and release them. It's not until President Reagan comes into office that they're released. And then later on, we find out that the United States went ahead and dealt with Iran, paid them for the hostages. We used that money to then supplement an anti-communist group called the Contras in Nicaragua, and then everybody found out about it, and it was a big scandal. Okay, Watergate was supposed to be in Nixon somewhere up there, and that one right there, the Watergate scandal, you guys should know this is what brought Nixon down. It demonstrates that he thinks he's above the law. And we demonstrate that he's not above the law. He eventually resigns because he was lying and keeping all these secrets. And so he's the first American president to resign the presidency. Reaganomics, oh, that's, Reaganomics goes right, well,
Yeah.
it goes well, Reaganomics is, an economic plan that was created by Ronald Reagan to stimulate the economy, where he's going to lower taxes and he's not going to regulate businesses that much, okay? And this is going to stimulate the economy. Camp David Accords, this one has to do with Jimmy Carter. He's going to invite 2 leaders, one from Egypt and one from Israel. They've been fighting for 30 years. They actually come to Camp David. Camp David is a presidential retreat house. They come, they negotiate peace, and this was a huge accomplishment for Jimmy Carter, okay? 1989 to the present, go ahead, cause.
Okay, so then with George Bush, the dad, you had the Persian Gulf War that starts, and then because of this war, we let Saddam Hussein go, which later on leads to the War on Terror, which is the whole 9/11 thing, and then we're fighting the War on Terror, and you have things like the Patriot Act, to where now they can tap into your phones, they can tap into your computer to make sure that you're not a terrorist. So we went from fighting communism way back when to fighting terrorism nowadays. And then under Bill Clinton, you had NAFTA, so now we're able to trade with Canada and Mexico without tariffs, without high tariffs. And then other people that you have, Obama, so first black president, and then you have Bill Gates, so PC guy, computers guy. And then we have today. Yay! Woo!